Hi, so this week's reading have really caused me to really ponder about various things concerning the topic of learner variability. It was very interesting watching the different videos and the readings from the text concerning this topic because um, some of the articles and just the chapters and the videos have really challenged my thinking process. When I think about an expert learner, for me, what comes to mind is someone who is experienced in a specific area in which they have taken time to learn and grasp and just mastered a particular skill. And so I think for these readings, I became what Howard Gardner talks of or highlighted in Unschooled Mind, that an expert as a person who comes to understand the world differently, and which is very difficult to do, and he argues that it's not done very often. And so for me, I think I came to understand this topic differently, and it was quite enlightening. When I was confronted um, in the text, the readings from Meyer, Rose, and Garden, text on universal design for learning, theory, and practice, the first thing that was on the page was challenging my notion, my thinking of, the expert is having the mindset that, it's not static, which I think maybe when I think about it, that's how I think of it, that it's not challenging the thought that it's not always a process of, that it's expert is always a process of that continuous learning practice. It's when you think of in the context of the UDL and the focus on the learning expertise, it's a lifelong process of becoming more motivated, knowledgeable, and skillful. So rather of thinking of it as a process of becoming more expert or on a continuum of development, it it also looks very different from person to person, right? And so that was really, um, I, I think, just something for me to think more about and to challenge my notion in thinking of it. So it's when thinking about the learning expertise and the learning, we have to think about as Mayor Rose and Garden shares is that to enable everyone to develop learning expertise, we need to design learning environments for them that are smart and flexible enough to support this ongoing continuous development of becoming, an expert learner. And I think these are things that we often miss when we're dealing with students and even modeling this idea of an expert learner. When, from the Todd Rose talk on variability matters, the very first thing again that he goes back to confronting that idea that we have had this notion of the myth that the average learner, and I guess when we have this mindset of the average learner, we come in having these different thinking of how we teach our students that it's not necessarily very helpful for them, and to understand that learning is more, um, it's a way of more, learning is more variable than we assume. Rose share, and understanding that the variability is critical when designing this next generation of learning environment. And so this is really a game changer. Neuroscience has really helped us to really come back some of these myths that we had and this thinking, which is such a harm and a damage in the learning expertise, teaching our students in becoming that expert learner. And we don't want to fall into that trap of thinking that that the thinking of the person's, strategy or the approach that we give one person, that we may have, that is gonna it's gonna work for everyone. It's optimal for everyone. One thing that really struck out to me is, when they in the illustration of the Rubik's cube, and how the idea that, it's that this person Felix in the video, that the strategy that he uses to master the cube may not be what may be for someone else, for me. And this idea of when we go into our classrooms and teaching our students, thinking about you know that teaching the different strategies, and when so that students may be able to take that strategy or choose which strategy that best fit their variability, enabling them to be at their best in whatever area. So Todd Rose says that the best strategy would depend on your particular variability, which is very interesting for me when I think about it. I said, that's really an important lesson, or important thought, that having these different strategies and realizing that we each, depending on our uniqueness, then we will grasp on what strategy works for us and be able to master that. And again, thinking about our learners, that when we can design our learning environment and our learning space in having this mindset, thinking that recognizing the variability, and that variability matters, that we are able to teach in such a way that when a student is not just seeing, giving them this one way of, we're in the classroom having this one way of thinking and one way of teaching, that we are doing such injustice for our students, and we're missing the various talents in our classroom. And so again, remembering variability matters, and having these thinking process of recognizing that it's important for us to recognize these areas, recognize the different students in our classroom, and to teach in a manner that each of them will use strategies that best suit their unique needs, and training them, to be these expert learners. And expert learners is not this static process of, where this mastery of this one skill, but it's a development, that it's a lifelong process of becoming ever more motivated and knowledgeable and skillful, as Meyer, Rose, and Gardner suggested. So this was quite such a great, I would say, reflection for me, and a lot of things for me to process about this. And so it's really been quite eye-opening, this notion of the learner variability and being an expert learner. So yes.